Okay, I'm going to move on to another paper that was also super interesting. It's which U.S. stocks generated the highest long-term returns. So I mean, yeah, the first question is the title: which stocks in the U.S. market have delivered the highest returns to investors? And I do want to actually say that you answer this question multiple different ways in the paper because there are a lot of different ways to look at it. So
Hmm.
I'll leave it open to interpretation how you want to answer the question.
Yeah, sure. Um, you know, Part of it is what do you mean by long-term returns? And I have at this point, I think 96 years, 97 years of data to work with from the CRISP database. So one way is to say, over the whole 96 or 97 years, who delivered the highest return? And the answer there is Altria Group, and it is a mind-boggling number when you actually compound the returns. So I don't have the exact number in front of me here, but it's in the vicinity of 250 million%. It's just a crazy high compound number. Um, but on the other hand, somebody might say, well, that's odd. I thought it was NVIDIA. Well, NVIDIA actually is at the top of the list if you don't measure things over the whole 95 years. So NVIDIA has
Mm,
been there, I don't remember the exact number, 25 years or so. NVIDIA has the highest compound return of any stock over at least a 20-year period.
hmm.
But since they only have about 25 years or so, it's not as big as the ones that have been there the whole 95 years. So uh, answering the question does require saying, well,
Yeah,
how long does a stock have to be in the data in the market uh, to be eligible to be included on the list,
yeah,
and it makes a difference.
yeah.
I think I read once, I don't remember when or what the time period was, but there was a point where Domino's Pizza was actually the highest compounding stock in history, like more so than a lot of these tech giants and stuff. Totally anecdotal, and I saw a chart of it somewhere, and I don't remember again what the time frame was, but it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's not always the stocks you immediately come to mind that are the biggest winners, right?
Yeah, and another point of perspective is, do we want to focus on the compound return, the buy and hold return, or do we want to focus on the annualized return, which again, if we want to be precise in our language, would be the geometric mean annual return. Um, and if you don't say, well, let's look at stocks that were there for at least 20 years. If you look at shorter periods, you can find some stocks with crazy high returns. And so I don't remember Domino's in particular, but you can find stocks with returns, 1,000% per year for a year or two. But one of the lessons of the paper is that those crazy high returns never persist over long periods.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, among the stocks that were at the top of the all-time leaderboard, that is their buy and hold returns over the 90 some odd years were the highest. Those were mostly stocks that were actually there for 70, 80, 90 years. But if you look at their annualized returns, I mean, they were good, but they weren't crazy good. They were
Mm,
more like 13, 14, 15%.
hmm.
And do you see any relationship between the type of company or industry and earning high returns?
So in the particular paper we're talking about, I didn't dig very deeply. I do have another paper that can be found on SSRN that goes to the question of which industries end up in the right tail. In that paper, I did things decade by decade, and I said, okay, what 100 stocks ended up in the right tail for this decade? And there might be a tendency to think it's consistently technology stocks that are over there, because if you look at the actual lists I've put together, you'll often see a lot of tech stocks near the top of the list. But I did not find that tech stocks were disproportionately likely to end up in the right tail. Another way to put that is there's a heck of a lot of tech stocks that ended up in the left tail that
Mm,
we've all forgotten their names. So it's not as simple as, well, tech stocks are the stocks that are there. I'll even go further and say it's not necessarily even what you'd call a sexy stock. So let me take a particular example. On that list of stocks that delivered the highest lifetime compound returns, so Altria Group's number one. Many of your readers will understand that's a tobacco stock. Don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. But number two on the list is a company called Vulcan Materials. I didn't know what Vulcan Materials was. I had to look it up. Vulcan Materials is a company that has products like sand, gravel, and asphalt.
Wow.
I don't want to be pejorative to our friends at Vulcan Materials, but most people would not call that a sexy business. But I think it's a really interesting lesson. I mean, Warren Buffett, among others, have pointed out the importance or desirability for an investor of competitive moats. Competitive moats can arise in a lot of different ways. If you think about sand, gravel, and asphalt, those things are really heavy. You don't move them a long ways. Having those resources in the right locations is a competitive moat. And I think that's relevant to understanding why this non-sexy company ended up performing so well. So, if there's any lesson, it's that performance can show up anywhere. And maybe you got to look beyond the obvious things like this is a tech firm or this is a firm, a firm that's engaged in disruptive technologies. Okay, makes sense to look there. But let's take one of my favorite examples. I personally think that passenger carrying drones are going to change the world. That's my view. So, if you run with that, you might say, well, let's start investing in the companies that are, or air taxis, if you prefer. Let's start investing in the companies that are working in that area. Well, maybe so, but again, it's competitive. We're not the first ones to think about this. Also, there's going to be a shakeup. Today's companies, some of them aren't going to make it, and there's the possibility that, even if I'm right, 20 years from now, passenger carrying drones have changed the world. It could be a company that we haven't heard of or doesn't exist yet that ends up at the top of the leaderboard. So, I don't think it's as simple as, go for the glamour companies. It's do your homework.
Yep. We've seen that in lots of industries like, electric vehicles recently, where prices shot up for all of them. And then a lot of them ended up being either actual frauds or there just wasn't much there.
Yeah. I have a couple of follow-on papers that we haven't touched on, but I created some lists of biggest wealth-destroying companies, and you can find a couple of electric car companies on that list.
I missed that paper. What was the name of the industry paper?
So the industry paper, the name was just something like which industries. No, I think it was do technology stocks dominate, something like that. But you can find it on SSRN. And then the other one that I referred to was just one of the updates. So I've been updating the papers on a 3-year cycle. So there's one that says how did wealth creation to 2019. Then there's another one that says wealth creation to 2022. In a while, there'll be one that says wealth creation to 2025. Slight variations on the titles, but I think you can find what I just referred to was the one that went through 2022.
I just found the do technology stocks dominate. I wish I'd found that one. I didn't find it when I was preparing for our conversation. I'm going to read that one though right after this.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess that means I've turned out enough papers that if not everybody knows about all of them, there's still room if you're interested.
So on this which stocks have generated the highest long-term returns paper, what do you think the practical insights are for investors?
I really think it comes back to this question of do you want skewness or not? If skewness doesn't get you excited, the arguments are stronger than ever for just diversify broadly. But if skewness gets you excited, and again, 2 reasons for that. You either think you're skilled or you just like the possibility of, the dream. You want to keep the dream alive. If you like skewness, then my paper says, well, diversification reduces skewness. So I think those are the practical implications.
All right, one more paper I want to talk about on mutual fund returns, it was super cool to see this paper because it kind of takes the, predictions, I guess, from the skewness and stock returns paper and puts it into like what happens in live portfolios when people are actually building relatively concentrated portfolios in an attempt to beat the market. And it's also the it's like an empirical investigation of the Heaton, Poulsen, and Witt paper that kind of says, yeah, this will probably happen, and then you show that yes, it in fact does.
Yep, exactly. This was take the ideas from the first paper to portfolios, and not to, you know, random bootstrap portfolios, but to actual portfolios that actual fund managers compiled and managed.